by now you've probably come across quite a few reviews, as I have, and people talking about the film, discussing that, it's been no secret really that people have been loving this film. We've had kind of the early screening reactions, then we had the reviews come out when the embargo lifted, and there's been nothing but high praise for Dune Part 2. So we know it's good, but the question is how good? Where does it kind of gauge in terms of the sci-fi lore and the sci-fi films of the generation? I mean, we've got things like Blade Runner, we've got the Star Wars films, which kind of aren't as much sci-fi. They are sci-fi elements, but it's not quite there. It's more like a space opera. So going into this, there's nothing I hate more than going into a movie with all these grand expectations and walking out feeling like it wasn't anywhere close to what I was hoping it would be. I had that kind of nervous anticipation going into Dune Part 2. Now, I loved Dune Part 1. Uh, I'll have my recap and review out for that as well. I thought it was a cosmic level, top tier, beautiful sci fi film. I think it's one of the best we've seen in years. I wouldn't necessarily it's the best, but it's one of the best. That being said, going into this, I had high expectations. Dune Part 2 does not disappoint. This film is so good. It is the realization of a real world. This I felt like I could get a plane ticket and fly to Dune, and it would look exactly as it does. It just felt so real. The CGI is amazing. The acting is amazing. The cinematography of this film. There was moments where I was just watching this and thinking to myself, this is just grand scale epic. It, it just hits you. And as I've said before, and as I feel this should be watched, Dune Part 1, I remember I watched it during COVID on a very crappy screen with terrible sound. And it was a good experience still. But I've watched it again since then with a good sound system and a much bigger screen, and it radically changed my experience. I think literally 50%, at least 50% of your viewing experience of Dune, at least with the first one, is the sound design and the wonderful Hans Zimmer score. This is no different. You need to watch it with the sound vibrating your brain, tickling your tonsils. That's where it needs to be. So, a few things to get out the way. Is Dune Part 2 better or worse than Dune Part 1? Far exceeds the first one. The first one was great. This Part 2 is cosmic, out of this world, exceptional, like so rewatchable. I've already booked my tickets to go watch it again. I'm going to be seeing it again next week, but this is just a grand level film. Now, I think I knew that going into this film that it was going to be great, and I kind of reset my expectations when I started watching it. But literally the first scene comes up, and I'm not going to talk about what it is. But as soon as you watch it, you're like, I'm in good hands. I know this is going to be great. I just know it. Um, it's not perfect. Like it's not a perfect film. There are things where I thought there could have been slight improvements, but that's like literally nitpicking, on such minute things that are ultimately insignificant compared to the real giant epic tale that the second film is. So the question for me that I really had is going into Dune Part 2 was, is it one of these films that I believe is going to endure through generations? Is it something that's going to influence filmmakers? You come out of films and they're special when you see them. For example, coming out of Lord of the Rings for the first time was a visceral experience. You walk out of it, and if you're creative and you're wanting to ever do anything in the film world, immediately I think it inspires filmmakers, it inspires actors, it inspires storytellers to think the realization of this is possible. We could do this. This is real. Like we could make something that is in the fantasy genre that is this epic tale that is loved by the audience and the critics and is just has endured the years. I mean, Lord of the Rings came out like what is it, 22 years now or something? I don't know. It's been over 2 decades, and this film is still enduring. Things like, I feel like coming out of The Dark Knight, watching that and that experience in that film, and that's not a perfect film either, but that was a generational film. It influenced the comic book genre. It changed the landscape. We had so much influences from that film bleed into the other films that we saw, even outside of the comic book genre. That's how powerful it was. You get these kind of one every few years films that comes out. And my question was Dune one of these films? What I can say is, I believe that as far as the fantasy genre goes, Lord of the Rings defined that. As far as the sci-fi genre goes, Dune Part 2 100% has defined the sci-fi genre. That's how good it is. It's literally become the benchmark for excellence in sci-fi storytelling. That's a grand, massive thing to say. This is not a like throw it around, this is all right, this is pretty good, you're gonna have a good time. This is a film that I believe is going to endure for years. It's going to create obviously a massive franchise. Now people are going to want to be getting more and more Dune. Why wouldn't you? There's a whole lot of books, there's a whole lot of stories to tell. This is a very rich universe. It gets really weird later on, I must be honest. Like, I've come across the books, I've read the first two, I got into the later ones, and they really get weird. But seeing them told this way, the first one at least, gives me hope that maybe they could lay them out in such a way that they could be just as grand and just as great. The story of Paul Atreides is not a traditional story. It's a unique take on the hero's journey. I'm not going to spoil it for you if you haven't read the books, but it is an epic tale that doesn't do what you'd expect. And that's refreshing, but it's also powerful. The way that Denis Villeneuve directed this film, he just directed the hell out of it. It's just brilliant. The scenes, you can just tell they've spent so much time thinking about this world, immersed in this world, developing this world, making the characters rich and layered. You go, and you see this in the trailers, you go to Gadi Prime, you see the Harkonnen world, and exploring that world in the way that they set it up, I just loved it. If you haven't seen this, all I can say is it's difficult to put into words how good this is. The reason I know that this film is great, I can always tell how good something is based on how I feel when I leave. And how I know it really is good is if it stays with me. The feeling it left with me hasn't gone away. It stayed with me. It's resonating with me. I think about it. Like, I want to see more of this world. So look, I think this movie needs to make all the money in the world. It's the perfect movie that we need right now. It's been dry. Like, I feel like I haven't seen a movie like this in years. Like, where I've gone there and I've watched a movie and I've just been blown away and I've been awestruck and I've just wanted to embrace a new, fresh take on something that uses imagination. And this is everything that I needed in my life. So I highly recommend it. As far as the scale goes, I mean, I've got my tiers, right? I've got the cosmic tier, which is films that I feel like are out of this world. You've got your earthbound, terrestrial films that, they're local. You can visit them. They're fun to spend some time with, but you don't need to see them all the time. They kind of just exist in the middle plane. And you got the graveyard, tombstone, underground, subterranean films, which you can just bury them. You don't need to watch them ever again. You don't even need to know they exist. They can just be forgotten. That's how I rate my films. And it's no surprise here that this is a cosmic tier film. It belongs in the highest level of lauded films in the past decade. If you haven't seen it, get your tickets, go watch it. You will not be disappointed. And if you liked the first Dune, you will love this one. If you were medium on the first Dune, this will probably win you over. Thank you for watching. And if you haven't already, give a subscribe. And if you can't do that, buy yourself a delicious donut. Have a fantastic week. See you next time.